You're listening to the Mezzo Guild podcast.
بس أنا لازم أحسه الأول عشان أقوله.
아직 나의 어색한 한국말이 짤따рат하고 지적하지 말아주세요.
Я хочу с тобой серьезно поговорить.
Greilig yn is faragod. No, yn chwythus Maldinas a hir sio.
Language learning, made simple. Are you learning a foreign language to further your career? Do you have a career in foreign languages? Of all the people that I've surveyed and listened to over the years, career is one of the most popular motivators for foreign language learning. The reality is that for most people, they don't actually have a passion or a deep interest in learning languages like some of us do. It's just a means to an end for them. I've found that there are generally two different scenarios with learners that I talk to. They either start learning a language because they want it to get them somewhere in terms of employment, the motivator to start in the first place, or they learn a language for another reason such as personal interest in the language, perhaps even become fluent in it, and then at some point down the track they decide that it's a good idea to use what they've already learned for a career or to further their existing career. I personally have never learned a language solely because I needed it for a job, but I can understand why so many people do. I also understand why these people usually, though not always, fail. Why they fail. Getting ahead can be a strong motivator for language learning, but obligatory things tend to breed a certain type of resentment. Either that or you just stop once a certain objective has been reached. Now, I learned Arabic for many years out of pure interest, because I just love the language and the people, and it wasn't until years later that people started to say to me, they started to ask me why I wasn't using it to earn a living. Now, I'd get questions asked like, why aren't you working in intelligence or teaching it or something? It's such a waste. Over time, I was convinced that this was indeed the thing that would make me happy, being able to use the very thing that I was so passionate about to earn a living. So I explored and I tried different options. Today, I want to share some of these to perhaps give you some ideas for using your foreign language skills to earn a living. Jobs tend to require a very high level in the language, so it's not exactly a case of being able to say, well, I want to do this job, so I'll start learning a language now and send out my CV in a few months' time. It really does take a lot of time and a lot of dedication to reach a professional level, just like anything else. So this will be something for you to think about if you're not there yet, or to consider if you're already at a high level. So the first one, the obvious one, is to become a translator. I've worked part-time as a freelance translator in Arabic over recent years. And one of my earlier podcast episodes, I actually talked about how I did this. Translation depends on three crucial skills above all. Number one, a very high language ability, obviously. Most obviously. Number two, experience or academic background in the field that you intend to translate. Now, contrary to what a lot of people might assume, translators don't translate everything. They're very specific on one or several areas of expertise. For example, they might just translate law, or they might just translate tourism stuff, or they might just be a health translator, just translating medical stuff, and so on. And number three, skill as a writer and translator into your own language. Believe it or not, translation skills are not the same thing as foreign language skills. You can be amazingly fluent in a foreign language and still be a useless translator. You also need to be skilled at business and marketing if you're going freelance, because it's a highly competitive field. Number two, get a career as an interpreter. So let's destroy a common misconception here for a moment. Translating and interpreting are two totally different things. They're not the same thing. Translation is about the written word. It's about changing texts. Now, I can't tell you the number of times that people have heard somebody speaking and said to me, can you translate what he's saying? You mean interpreting? Interpreting is spoken, and I would argue a much more challenging job than translation. It's much more challenging. I've only worked in a volunteer capacity as an interpreter once in my life, and compared to sitting down with a dictionary, as a translator would, while translating documents on a computer screen, where you can really just go at your own pace, it's tough. Interpreting is tough. This is because you have to deal with people who are speaking spontaneously and colloquially, and you need to be equally spontaneous and accurate. Also consider the fact that many interpreters work in roles where they have to interpret comments that can have disastrous consequences if they're interpreted incorrectly. For example, interpreting between patients and doctors in a hospital, interpreting between two politicians of two different countries, or between a lawyer, a defendant, and a judge. Now, friends of mine who work as interpreters have told me so many times that of the challenges that they face, but also the many personal and financial rewards, as it's something that they love to do. Now, if that sounds like the kind of challenge that you'd find rewarding, then go for it. But if you're more of a sit down and work on your own, you work at your own pace type person, then translating is probably a better option for you. Number 3, apply for a foreign language intelligence role. Now, quite a few years ago, I applied for one of these roles in Australia, in my country. I'd always envisaged myself as Australia's Arabic-speaking James Bond in waiting. Of course, intelligence agencies are nothing like the movies, but just like most guys, I thought it would be a dream come true. So I went through the intense multiple-stage process, which included online tests and psychological stuff and interviews. And unfortunately, I missed out on it right at the end. I didn't make it through. But needless to say, it was a major disappointment at the time. During the process, however, I did learn a lot from people, and I spoke with the officers. I spoke with some of the intelligence officers, both domestically and abroad. And at the end of the day, what appealed to me most about the intelligence role that I applied for was the fact that it's a relational job. It's for people who are good with people. So even though foreign languages may be your forte, people skills and personal charisma could be the determining factor for whether a typical intelligence officer role is worth going for. There are, of course, linguist jobs as well in intelligence agencies, but as I mentioned before with regard to interpreters, for any kind of job like this, you need to be skilled enough to spot very subtle nuances in texts that could have serious ramifications if translated incorrectly. Number 4. Work as a teacher of a foreign language. I always say that you should always have a native speaker as a teacher. There's obviously so much that non-native teachers can't teach, no matter how good they are in the language. There are always going to be expressions and colloquialisms that a non-native will miss. However, non-native teachers do have their place, and there is a lot that native speakers often cannot articulate or explain properly to learners. More importantly, they can't really relate to learners of their own language because they've never had to do it themselves. And this is the key point. For example, I work with native Arabic teachers to help people learn Arabic. That's what I do now. And I often explain concerns and perspectives to my Arabic-speaking friends that they previously had no idea about. These are things that I know learners struggle with because I've struggled with them myself. Similarly, when I've taught English overseas and worked with local co-teachers of English, they've been able to explain certain things to students that I'm not able to, even though it's my own language. So if teaching a foreign language is your interest, look into roles where non-native teachers are employed in support roles for native teachers. That combination of native teacher plus learner teacher can produce some very effective results. Number 5. Work in a customer service position that requires foreign languages. While not a foreign language job per se, this is worth mentioning. Customer service roles of just about every kind are increasingly in need of more multilingual staff. I can recall so many different occasions in my own life and stories from friends where foreign languages have been a major advantage in a customer service position. This just made me think about a time recently when I met a Jordanian guy who worked for Emirates, for the airline. And when I started talking to him in Arabic, he was so impressed that he actually gave me the contact details of his hiring manager in Dubai and said that if I needed a job in his department, I'd be a shoo-in. And I wasn't interested in this job, but it was encouraging. Unless you live out in the boonies, just knowing another language these days will actually get you ahead in just about any job that involves talking to people. Certain languages will get you further than others, of course, but the mere fact that you speak another language will usually put you ahead of others who don't. It also looks fantastic on a resume. And many companies favor multilingual over monolingual applicants. Number 6, take a linguist job in the military. A while ago, I talked about my experience applying for a job as a signals operator linguist, which is now called an operational air intelligence analyst in the Australian Defence Force. I found the testing to be a great indicator of how well you'll pick up a new language under pressure in an intensive training period. We were a group of about 30 people being tested, and only 4 of us made it through. Obviously, the great perk in taking a job like this is that government is paying you a lot of money to learn and use languages, and this pay scale actually increases for the languages that you know. The downside, of course, is that you learn what they want you to learn. Don't be surprised if you go in thinking that you're going to choose French and you end up being taught Somali or Farsi instead. And number 7, become a full-time language blogger or online content creator. When I first began my blog several years ago, it was just a hobby to give me an outlet for my passion, which is language learning. And since then, over time, it's become a full-time job for me and allowed me to spend each week learning languages and to share my experiences with people around the world. It's enabled me to move freely, work anywhere and focus on what I care about the most. And I detailed exactly how I did this on my blog. If you go to my blog and go up to the menu at the top, you'll find a link to it. I also use my passion for Arabic to create a unique online resource for Arabic learners called talkinarabic.com. Of course, languages can benefit lots of other fields as well. For instance, I have friends working because of their languages in humanitarian roles, other friends working on projects for the international deaf community in sign language training. These kinds of jobs don't always guarantee a salary. If you're a trained linguist or a computer programmer, there are also companies like Appen, Appen, which hire linguists and computational linguists for major development projects. And you can check out their job vacancy list on their website. Foreign languages will make you more competitive in the workplace. One of my biggest selling points in job interviews is my foreign language repertoire. It looks impressive to most employers when a candidate can speak another or several different languages, as it generally shows that he or she has good communication and problem-solving skills and is open-minded and culturally aware. If the employer is advertising a role that requires dealing with the public, especially government roles, they'll usually look at your foreign languages very favorably for this reason. Particularly for those of us from the US, Australia, the UK, where monolingualism is much more the norm than other English-speaking countries, and it's fast becoming the case where multilingualism is now expected in many roles.